Bienvenidos a Madrid. Maybe one day my Spanish will be good enough for a full video, but for now we're switching back to English. The product of a dictatorship and now the biggest carrier of the Latin world, today I fly Iberia's business class for the first time. The Spanish flag carrier has a number of long-haul services to the Americas, and I wanted to try to nab their newest product on the A350 from Madrid to Quito, Ecuador. I don't know about y'all, but the Iberian Peninsula might be one of my favorite corners of the spherical globe. From Porto to Palma, Barcelona to Bilbao, and Malaga to Madrid, I always find myself having a great time. Despite my travels here, however, I've never tried Iberia's business class. So while planning a big Latin America trip, I figured it was time to try out one of Europe's biggest airlines and British Airways' best friend. Timestamps will be included below to search what you're looking for, but for now it's off to Adolfo Suarez, Madrid-Barajas Airport. Iberia uses Terminal 4 in Madrid, which is their largest terminal and has won a whole slew of awards since it opened in 2006. I mean, look at this thing. And it only gets better the closer we get to the gate. When Terminal 4 opened, it was turned over to Iberia and their One World partners, allowing for expansion with less restrictions, benefiting the city and country as it could grow its global market share. At the time, Iberia was over 60% of the airport's flights. Iberia still runs the majority of check-in areas with dedicated halls for each cabin class. The business class lines were fairly long, with 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. being the majority of their long-haul flights, so everyone shows up at once to check in, taking about 20 minutes to get through. To make up for it, one benefit of business class is the fast-track security, which only took about 10 minutes as opposed to over half an hour. Once through security, you see an Iberia lounge that seems to be super convenient. Unfortunately, this is before immigration, and they try to only allow access to those remaining in the Schengen area. Terminal 4 has two concourses, the main concourse where you check in and go through security, but if you're leaving Europe, you'll head out to the satellite concourse. And while this terminal might be beautiful, it definitely ain't efficient. You'll see signs saying the S gates are 23 minutes away, and there's really no way to trim that down. There's a train to the satellite gates, and it's the only way to get out there. No walking or anything else. The train does take a fair bit, and then you're offloaded directly into the outbound immigration. They actually try to organize you on the train based on which passport you hold, since it aligns better with the ropes once you're off. All in all, it took me 58 minutes to get from the curb to the S gates, so account for that if you're departing Madrid from Terminal 4. The lounge is in a bit of an odd spot. As you head through the duty-free shop, you'll see the red entrance halfway through. The Velazquez Lounge, as it's known, is their largest lounge in Madrid and a flagship lounge of sorts. It does get busier as the morning goes on, but I got here early specifically to get some content. It's kinda a horseshoe shape, so walking from one end to the other, they do clearly label where things are with the signage. There's a buffet at the end, two counters, one with the carbs and one with the fruits, meats, and dairies. Plus, there's a drink counter along the wall across the hall. There's tables for dining, but not that many, so you'll have to share or sit somewhere else. There's a quaint corner around the corner that remained fairly quiet, with smaller seating, but also a bar that wasn't open just yet. There was a snack cart, however, and some excellent ramp views of the Iberia and American lineup on this Friday morning. Walking towards the other end, there's a play section for kids with video games with its own refreshment bar. The majority of the hallway is seating, although I feel that they could fit a bit more. It does feel airy the way it is, at least. There's a split section, with one side being the viewing room and the other being the dedicated workspace, as if that stopped people from working around the whole lounge. Then the seating began to look familiar as I realized there was another buffet on this side of the lounge. I expected there to be another bar around the corner, but instead I found an honest-to-goodness dining room. It seems to be similar to the Polaris dining room or American flagship dining, although it didn't seem to be open yet. Unfortunately, there were bars blocking half the views out the windows, even if they do help block the sun, but if you crouch down, you can get some clear shots of the aircraft on the ramp, as we were facing one of the main departure runways. They also have dedicated sleep suites and shower stalls bookable at the front desk. I got my temporary code for my shower and then entered my private room. Iberia stocks these with towels and amenities, although water pressure was bleak. Then it was time to head to my gate. While in the lounge, I actually watched our aircraft arrive from Bogota, the 6-year-old A350-900 that has only ever been with Iberia. I booked the flight hoping to be on one of the updated interiors, so we'll have to see if I end up with what I paid for. Unfortunately, I watched the plane pull into a remote stand, so I figured this meant we'd be boarding by bus, although the airport signage directed me through the stunning terminal to gate S26, where an A350 awaited outside. Just when I got my hopes up, they announced that our plane was across the airport, and we'd be taking buses out there. I lined up for Group 1 boarding, and eventually we boarded down the jet bridge where confusion ensued, before we finally boarded the buses. As we make our way to the aircraft, I need to spend just a second talking about the new changes to Iberia's frequent flyer program. It's no secret that BA just alienated a ton of customers with their horrendous changes to the status program, and as Iberia is under the same parent company, they have similar changes coming, although it will be much easier to reach status with Iberia. Like BA, Iberia's points are now cost-based instead of distance, but they will offer points for ancillary purchases like seats, bags, and priority, hopefully offering additional incentives for passengers to choose a higher fare class. The new structure has 7 tiers. You start in the Classica tier by default, and once you spend 3,500 euros or take 20 flights, you reach the Plata tier, which includes One World Ruby status, which gives you priority check-in, preferred seating, and priority on standby. If you spend 7,500 euros or take 40 flights, you reach the Oro tier, giving you One World Sapphire status, including all the Ruby stuff plus business class lounges, priority boarding, free checked bags, and priority baggage handling. Once you spend 20,000 euros or take 90 flights, you reach the Platino level, which includes One World's highest level of status, Emerald, including all the stuff from Ruby and Sapphire, plus first-class lounges and fast-track security. This is the last tier you can access with flights alone, but then it's the Platino Prime at 30,000 euros, Infinita at a whopping 400,000 euros, and Infinita Prime at 640,000 euros, which Iberia says is somewhere no passenger has ever gone before. Enough of that though, let's get on board this Airbus beast. I dislike the bus boarding for almost every reason, but mostly because we line up for priority boarding in Group 1. But by the time you get on the bus, Groups 1, 2, and 3 all get crammed together and the priority boarding kinda goes out the window. But it does allow for unparalleled views of the aircraft. I was welcomed on board with the unfortunate news that we did not get Iberia's new cabin. This one is a retro A330 cabin that was slapped on early A350s. We actually covered the same seats in videos like Azul and Air Serbia, but that Iberian hospitality can be judged separately. By the way, book yourself an even-numbered window seat or odd-numbered middle seat for extra privacy from the aisle. There's an adjustable headrest and a seat cushion with just about no more cushion left. There's an armrest that moves when you move the seat, and then I got 2 of those big A350 windows. There's a TV that was super reflective until we got some window shades closed, and then a big footwell, which is good since there's no leg rest. There is plenty of storage below it, however, enough for a backpack. There's a literature pocket down there, and then a tray table that folds out from the seat back, big enough for the meal or a computer, but not both. The armrest on this side doesn't really come up high enough, although it can be adjusted manually, plus a water bottle holder down there as well. The counter's a real good size, although totally exposed, with the seat controls and remote on the inside edge. There's some shelving above the counter as the real storage in the seat, and located above the outlets, but unfortunately, no overhead air vents. We were given a fair spread of amenities. We got the beverage choice, so I chose the Cava champagne type beverage. Then was the bedding, which came in 2 bundles, the blanket/pillow bundle, and the mattress pad. There were headphones that were rock hard, damaged, and couldn't be used while charging without a static sound in your ears. I did like the amenity kit, however. The Iberia color palette on the bag, but inside was thigh-high socks along with the basic amenities. The bookmark was a bonus, however, and I did like the sizable lotion and lip balm. There aren't any slippers, unfortunately, but there were some in the shower suites in the lounge, so I brought them with me on board and was able to use those to get extra cozy. Iberia has to be one of the most unique origin stories, including dictators, colonization, and the attempt at becoming a legit Pan Am type carrier. They're 2 years from their centennial, having begun services in 1927, founded by a Spanish investor and Lufthansa. They started as many other carriers at the time, mail, providing services largely between Madrid and Barcelona, eventually reaching Spanish Africa and the Canary Islands. Miguel Primo de Rivera's dictatorship did funky things to the country's airlines, essentially forcing them all under one brand. The Iberia name remained registered, but they didn't have any operations. During the Spanish Civil War, the nationalist-held territory acquired capital from Lufthansa to relaunch Iberia, coming back officially in 1937 near the end of the war, although it was strictly domestic until Lisbon started in 1939. In 1940, the government gave all national air transport to Iberia. This was short-lived, but allowed them to grow quick as a flag-carrying international airline. The nationalized airline also broke its ties to Germany, allowing for U.S. relations, which was mostly needed to get new aircraft and supplies. Using the new DC-4 from the U.S., Iberia flew the first ever Europe to South America flight between Madrid and Buenos Aires in 1946, before launching flights to a handful of Latin countries. The airline benefited from the country's location as they were hired for charters for Mediterranean vacationers, and in 1953 U.S. citizens no longer needed visas to visit Spain, so Iberia launched New York flights on the same day that Columbus set sail for the Americas, although hundreds of years later, obviously. By the 70s, Iberia flew to nearly all Latin America countries. It took a while due to the Francoist regime, but once they were there, they made their presence known. They helped Latin countries form their own airlines, like Luna, Air Panama, Compañía Dominica de Aviación, and Aerolíneas Peruanas. And once more stable, in the 90s, they went full in on Latin airline investments, like Aerolíneas Argentinas, Viasa of Venezuela, and Chile's Ledeco. The goal was to create a true global carrier. When Latin airlines struggled, Iberia was able to increase its share to take more control, like with Aerolíneas Argentinas in the 90s being a prime example. Plus, most of the carriers were so focused on US routes from Europe that Iberia went full throttle on the Latin markets and have had their grasp on the loads ever since. In 1991, Iberia even opened a hub in Miami, so they could use MD-80s to reach more Latin cities with smaller loads, and it was so successful that they upgraded the fleet to A319s, although they did pull out after 9/11 made the US connections difficult. Unfortunately, Iberia's Latin dominance began to crumble in the 2000s. The Aerolíneas Argentinas investment was proving to be too costly. Venezuela decided to suspend all Viasa operations, and Ledeco was acquired by the growing LAN Chile. This caused Iberia to shift their focus of being a global airline to being a Spanish-European carrier, merging with British Airways in 2009 to create the world's third largest airline, forming the International Airlines Group, and growing outside of their majority Latin markets, now with 8 US destinations, 3 in Asia, and 1 non-Morocco African destination in Dakar. given menus shortly after departure split into English and Spanish. On this flight, we get 2 meals and some snacks, par for the course for 11 hours on an airplane in business class. The main meal will be right after departure, standard since items are freshly catered, not melted, wilted, or sitting for too long. But the other stuff does still look great. Plus, there's some great wines and aperitifs available. Plus, Iberia is known to work in the local cuisine in their flights, which is great news since Spain has such a robust food scene. As we waved toodaloo to the Portuguese coast and began our transatlantic crossing, we were given hot towels while they prepped the meals. Then, to start, we were asked for our beverage choice, and then either cheese or olives. I got the cheese and the 2015 Rioja, which was an A+ decision on my part. Then they brought the carts through with the starters. I asked for the prawns but was handed the other option, the baby zucchini with spinach and lettuce in a yogurt lemon dressing, along with a choice of white or brown bread. They then collected that and delivered the main course. I chose the vegetarian option since I was still full from the lounge breakfast. It included the ricotta-filled pasta in a mushroom sauce with mushrooms and parmesan. I know that Iberia is known for their meats, but this was still tasty. They then brought the dessert carts through. It was a tough choice, but I decided on the flan, which was delicious. And as much as the dessert wines looked nice, I opted for a coffee since I wasn't planning to sleep on this flight. Just because I'm not sleeping doesn't mean we can't look at the bed. The seat does go flat but makes a screeching noise the whole way down. First thing I did was lay down the mattress pad. I love when airlines include these. Iberia's may not be the most plush, but it does hide the cracks and lumps in the seat cushion. Then the pillow, which is a great size and super soft, although I folded it in half for some more sustenance. Then lastly is the comforter, which is large enough to cover the entire surface and then some. I'd imagine the new suites are far more comfortable, but this isn't really that bad. Especially with the even-numbered seats and the extra privacy, otherwise your legs are right in the aisle. Just see my recent Air Serbia video if you're curious what that feels like. Unfortunately, even with the even-numbered seats, there isn't much privacy. It reminds me of Delta's 767-300 seats. The counter's a good size, but nothing blocking it from the aisle. So unless everyone's laying down, people will see you, especially when walking past. Good thing it's a daytime flight, so I really just want to be comfy, and I definitely was. When you're looking for some mid-flight snacks, they've definitely got you covered, as the galley had a whole cart of snacks. There were simple items like fruit and nuts, but they also had ham and cheese sandwiches if you want that last taste of jamón ibérico. There's also 2 restrooms for the 24 business class passengers. They're a good size, and I do like the finishings they chose, but for all the space Airbus gives for amenities, it was a bummer to just see some hand cream. And as we fly past the Caribbean, the only bit we got to see was the tiny island nation of Dominica. Still stunning though. The Caribbean's a part of the world I still have never been to, believe it or not. I've got some tentative plans for later this year, but let me know if there's any Caribbean videos you'd like to see. I will say that we shortly overflew the Venezuelan coast just west of Caracas. I have multiple plans involving Venezuela, but the visa to visit is about as difficult as can be, unless I want to go spend a couple of weeks in Bogota just hoping that the visa is delivered from the embassy there. Iberia does offer Wi-Fi on the A350, so after connecting I went to iberiawifi.com where I saw the flight info and packages available. There was a note that business class passengers could get free messaging, but otherwise the full flight Wi-Fi was about $24. Once connected, it was unfortunately slow and cut out intermittently as we crossed the Atlantic. Looking at the entertainment on the screen, I really did like the interface, even though the hardware is older. The menu showed the different types of content, but they really did have a great selection of movies. There was a bunch of familiar titles, and especially a good selection of new releases, including many of the Oscar-nominated titles. There's TV programs too with multiple seasons, although not full seasons, and you can add things to favorites, which was great, although after my first movie, the system wouldn't let me watch any more. The ads played just fine, but then the movie would just pull up and freeze. Multiple titles, same issue. So I guess I really can't wait to fly those A350s with the upgraded interior. A little over an hour before arrival, the carts appeared in the aisle again as the lights came up and we prepared for our final meal. They gave us the hot option or cold option. I chose the hot option, which was the pisto pie served with a vegetable tartare, roasted zucchini, and olive. This came with bread, but I was too full for that, and then I chose to drink the water they gave us earlier. They did offer a final aperitif service, but I chose the chamomile tea since I was planning to sleep shortly after arrival to Ecuador. Sure, Spanish colonization has been over for hundreds of years in a literal sense, but many countries maintain bilateral partnerships across all industries, and this allows Iberia, as Spain's largest airline, to cash in on these routes. Iberia first reached Latin America in 1946 with a flight between Madrid and Buenos Aires, a 36-hour journey in a DC-4 with stops in Villa Cisneros, Natal, Rio, and Montevideo. Ever since then, Iberia has gone full throttle in Latin markets, flying to every single country at one point. As these American countries created their own long-haul networks, you could bet that Madrid was goal number one. Avianca launched Bogota to Madrid, BOA launched Santa Cruz to Madrid, and as LATAM has created its branch in different countries, we've seen services to Madrid from Brazil, Chile, Peru, and Colombia. Unfortunately, South America to Europe was the slowest intercontinental growth to return after COVID. Business destinations bounce back fast, but these are far and few between, like Mexico City, Bogota, and Buenos Aires. Most Latin American cities rely on leisure travelers, which is why routes like Santa Cruz, Caracas, and Montevideo took so much longer. Iberia was by far the quickest airline to bounce back, aided by its network size in the region, but LATAM and Aeromexico weren't far behind despite only 30% the volume of Iberia. And Qatar and Emirates were using their global brands to seize the large markets of Sao Paulo, Rio, and Buenos Aires. By now, most markets are back to normal, with most countries seeing better numbers than pre-COVID. 2024 saw 10 million passengers departing Europe for South America for the first time ever, and that doesn't even include Central America. 28 airlines now serve Europe to Latin America, with Iberia seeing roughly 20% of the market across their 18 destinations. LATAM holds second place and TAP Portugal in third, although skewed since all their cities are in Brazil besides Caracas and Cancun. Low-cost carriers are also bringing new life to additional destinations. Air Europa serves 8 Latin destinations not currently served by Iberia, plus Ultra has 3 unique destinations. European low-cost carriers like Iberojet and World2Fly offer a few unique routes, and then countries like Bolivia, Mexico, Colombia, and Cuba fly to Europe from their own unique destinations with their own carriers, and that's just the routes to Spain. All said and done, summer 2025 will see roughly 350 weekly flights on Iberia alone to Latin America, and that's just a fraction of the total. To be honest, my interest in Quito started with Microsoft Flight Simulator X. There was a mission involving Quito and it looked beautiful and like a great place to visit, and honestly, it lived up to the hype, at least on arrival. It's just bad there were clouds. Just to think, it took me 20 years to get here, just to visit Ecuador in general. I heard someone say that Ecuador is Latin America's brainy cousin that minds their own, except for the sporadic worldwide kingpin that brings ultra chaos for a short while, before everyone just returns to business as usual. I'll have to see what I think of the country, but for now we can discuss Iberia. I've had interest in Iberia for a long time, although for different reasons. At the moment, it was the largest European carrier that I hadn't covered despite spending a lot of time in Latin America. Madrid Airport is so funny to me, possibly the best looking airport while being the least efficient if you're leaving immigration. Which, by the way, only really applies to Terminal 4. Iberia's priority for business class doesn't work as well as others just because their flights are all in the same few hours. I mean, it's still far better than economy, but not as great as other European carriers. After the double overtime journey it takes to get to the satellite concourse, I actually felt the lounge was incredible. They found a way to tie in the Iberia colors and finishings without letting that red get too overwhelming. I'm looking at you, Avianca. Spoiler alert for next week. The breakfast selection wasn't great at the buffet, so I do wish the dining room was open, but still a well-rounded meal. I also felt they partitioned off the spaces well enough that it still felt moderately private unless you sat right next to the buffet. The surplus of bus gates in Madrid is an epidemic of its own, like Lisbon, but on board I was disappointed not to have the most current product that I was hoping for. It's unfortunate that Iberia basically slapped the A330 product on the A350s, but at least it's a 1-2-1 setup with lie-flat seats. Other than that, however, there's nothing to write home about. I honestly thought I'd get the current product since the aircraft sees Bogota flights, but I guess not. The entertainment was a letdown, but the offerings looked incredible, so I chop it up to the older screens on the outdated interior. The food, however, is where they really shine. There's complaints about the cart services, but the quality of the food was excellent in my opinion, and that's top of the great beverage options as well. If there's one saving grace for the product, is that they don't overly advertise the new product. Qatar, for example, raves about the Q suites, even throughout booking. They tell you that you're booking this world-class experience, they give you 3D views of the cabin while you book, and then they give you an equipment swap right before departure and put you in a product that not even US carriers would be caught dead offering. Iberia raved about the soft product mostly, and it 100% lived up to the hype. So let's just hope that the new interior becomes more common. Let me know what you think, however, and until next Sunday, safe travels. I'll see y'all next time.